So good afternoon and welcome to our session around virtual beer testing, or should I say our webinar around virtual beer testing, how best of breed security works with Microsoft 365. So welcome and thank you so much for taking some time out to have a drink with us this afternoon and to enjoy kind of an hour or so of conversations around DLP, Blue Source, Mimecast, Netskope, and of course, Siren Craft Brew. So with me today, I've got Ross Asquith. Ross, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, thanks, John. Hello, everybody. So I work for Netskope. I'm part of the sales engineering team here in the UK. So I spend a lot of time talking to customers about modernizing their security stacks and helping them manage the use of the cloud within their organizations.
Brilliant. Thank you, Ross. And listen, great to have you on board today as well. So look forward to it. Ben, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, sure. Hi, thanks, John. So I'm Ben Parham. I'm a technical consultant for Mimecast. So much like Ross, I go out and I see quite a lot of our customers and new prospects and talk to them about the email security challenges nowadays.
Ben, good to have you on board as well. Thank you, guys. Sure. And Matt, I'd like to say, you've probably got the best of all of our jobs, but listen, welcome, Matt. Would you like to introduce yourself and actually start the process today?
Yeah, thanks, John. And thanks for having me and getting beers to all these people. My name's Matt. I am the events manager at Siren Craft Brew. I do have a pretty fun job of drinking beer for a living. It's definitely not the worst job I've ever had. If you want to enjoy a beer during today's presentation, my suggestion would be to have a can of Yulu, which is our lightest beer. It's a 3.6% pale ale. And then obviously after the presentation, I will then guide you through 3 different beers. But I will talk more about those and introduce those after the presentation.
So I will dive into that, Matt. Thank you very much. Cheers, everybody. Thank you for joining us.
Yeah.
What we'll try and do today is spend a couple of minutes on, for those who maybe haven't worked with Blue Source in the past, I'll spend a minute or so on that one. For those that have, but maybe don't understand or know our data protection story, I'll spend a couple of minutes on that. We've done some research as well, and I'll get the high level view of that. And then we'll, to get to nuts and bolts of what DLP means, integration, and why we felt this session would work well today. Go through a bit of that, do a couple of polls, get back on track, and finish up. And hopefully, in about 20 minutes' time, we can get back to enjoying one of these lovely Siren Craft beers. So, Matt, thank you. For those that don't know, Blue Source, 20 years of experience working with some of the most complex and regulated organizations in the country, in finance, banking, legal, insurance markets. This has allowed us to develop award-winning services around modern workplace, data and cloud migrations, and data compliance. And of course, what we're going to talk about today, data protection. Data being the core focus for Blue Source. We look at partnering and we look at Gartner. So we always try and choose Magic Quadrant right leaders. And we've got 2 of them on board today with Mimecast and Netskope. So those that haven't got involved too much in a data protection story, risk and compliance is a key part to it. This is where we understand current risk and policy to manage external compliance and internal governance, focusing on your data, whether that's GDPR, MiFID II, PCI. We can also give you visibility of your unstructured data to allow the right policy to be applied and that data secured. So allowing users to see the data that policy allows is the first step towards what we term a zero trust model. So especially as we move to managing cloud and cloud risk. So protect and prevent, this function is concerned with having safeguards in place to ensure continued delivery of infrastructure and data and cloud services. Protecting communication channels has meant we've got a long partnership with Mimecast. We've also been a Microsoft Gold partner, and we understand its core strengths and that mega trend of moving towards it, but we also see some of the gaps. So we're also very excited to welcome Netskope to our stable of products, as we believe this helps us secure the network as our clients move to cloud service and applications. So I just made a jump there. So with Netskope, this also allows us to look at next-gen gateways, meet DLP requirements. Obviously, we'll talk a bit more about that later, but also meet our cloud security requirements. Netskope and Mimecast also ties into our data-centric approach, and their solutions allow context to the data that's now predominantly stored in the cloud. And we also see the need for end-user training is a key part of that protect story. How do we make cultural changes? And we know Mimecast help us support those initiatives. So detect is really around identifying bad actors and potential breaches. Again, both Mimecast and Netskope bring a wealth of value to BlueSource and our clients. Again, DLP is key here, but we also use tagging and classification to understand what the data is and therefore what policy and security should be applied. Understanding intent to what data people are using allows us to detect these issues early. Respond and recover. This function is concerned with how to contain a breach, stop the spread, and how and when to invoke recovery. This is when we will discuss the integration again between Mimecast and Netskope. But ultimately, it may mean our immutable backup and recovery service may be required to recover those key applications, whether they're in premise, virtual cloud, or SaaS environments. And of course, manage. How do we support your gaps in your skill sets? How do we support your IT function, whether that's reactive, proactive, whether that's a managed service or a managed outcome as well? And again, a lot of you on the call would have seen some of these services as well. So some of this research we've done, again, the growth of data stored, fairly simple one there. It's going to rise to 78% in the next 5 years. 62% of you out there are looking to move more apps to the cloud. Again, fairly obvious. But one of the key reasons of not moving to the cloud is security at 84%. People are looking to keep certain applications on premise because of the security implications. And as always, non-compliance is a major issue, with 89% agreeing that greater regulations is making the move to the cloud more challenging. So key priorities remain that move to the cloud, 62%. Improving monitoring is one of the key areas we're discussing today with DLP. And of course, cost savings, reduction of downtime, protecting against ransomware, and good data governance are all still top priorities since COVID hit. So today we're focused on the 84% who have security concerns around moving to the cloud. Whilst it's a massive area, let's consider and try and break it down to one of the key threat vectors that are most prevalent out there, and what can we do about it. So at this stage, hopefully we've set the scene. Hopefully you see where BlueSource can help. But Ben, I'd like to kind of bring you in at this stage when we're talking about security concerns. We're moving to the cloud, and particularly when we talked about that email threat and that side of it.
Great, thanks, John. And email still very much the main way people communicate. In fact, half the world have mailboxes nowadays. And if we just take that back to business kind of email, there's roughly 125 billion business emails sent or received every day. So email still really is the main communication method that people use out there to talk to their customers and to talk to their supply chain. Now, it's not just businesses that use email, as John pointed out in some of his stats there. Email is one of the main target routes for organizations or for their threat actors to attack an organization. If we have a look at the email in the example here, we can see an impersonation of the World Health Organization here. The email's got a URL in it, and it could also have an attachment within that email. And they tend to be the three main ways we see attacks coming through with emails nowadays. So the URL pointing to a phishing site designed to capture someone's details or to allow them to download, or to get them to download malware, I should say. Attachments, obviously, within the emails can be malware themselves. And then you've got the impersonation around the email. So Mimecast treats these in a few different ways. First of all, the URLs will rewrite those URLs, and each time the user clicks on those, we'll do our deep level inspection on things. Attachments within the emails will sandbox those, and we'll put them through our static analysis engines, making sure they're clean before delivering them down to your users. Now, the impersonation in the email, yes, we would be looking out for impersonation of the World Health Organization as well, but I just want to twist the email in there very slightly. And excuse, my cat has just jumped up on my desk. So if we say this email is coming from your HR department, and maybe it's the latest work from home kind of guidance. So parts of the Mimecast platform that we've got around our impersonation protection can actually look for those characteristics within the email and alert your users to them. Either we could hold these emails up and stop them going through to your users in the first place, even if they're pretending to be from your HR department, or we can tag the body of the messages. We can let the people know who the actual email address behind these are and take various different actions off the back of them. Now, all of this gives Mimecast loads of really good threat intelligence, seeing all of these things happen at the email gateway, at the perimeter of the business. So we see the attacks hitting your business. Majority of attacks do come from email, and this information we can feed through into one of our integrations with Netskope. The other thing just to mention on this part here is the personal email coming through wouldn't be covered by Mimecast at this side. But the threat intelligence we can gain if stuff is coming through, like I say, we can feed into Netskope and they can protect against it from that side. With that, I'll pass over to Ross just to talk about the Netskope side.
Yeah, thanks, Ben. And we've obviously built the site out a little bit more now, because what happens, if somebody does click on that phishing link, let's say, it has managed to get into the organization, and personal webmail might be a good example of how it could come in through and kind of be missing some of Mimecast defenses. Someone opens up their Gmail and follows that link. What's interesting nowadays is where that link goes, because like so many of our own organizations, the cyber criminals, the bad guys, they've also adopted cloud in a big way. And we more often than not now see attacks on organizations, threats using the cloud to deliver either many stages or a stage of an attack. And in this example, I've kind of gone to town with every stage of the cyber kill chain here, utilizing cloud. Whether it's command and control that's coming from Slack, or a data exfiltration by the malware into Dropbox, for example. So the reason, obviously, that cyber criminals love using cloud services to deliver these types of payloads and attacks is much like it is for us, it's a scalable infrastructure that they can easily use. It has a global presence. It's highly reliable, all the same reasons we choose these cloud applications. But they also choose them because they know that they're unlikely to be blocked by the traditional controls that an organization might have. If you're an Office 365 customer, you're more than likely allowing office.com and all of the other associated domains at your gateway filtering solution, typically a secure web gateway. So if we can't differentiate between the bad guys' Office 365 environment and our Office 365 environment, then we have a bit of a problem. So this was just an example of how things have evolved. The cyber criminals have moved just like us into the cloud, and how we need to be a little bit smarter about how we govern access to these types of services, even if they are the cloud applications that we're using ourselves. So Ben mentioned about sharing intelligence, and I think that it's a great example. The phishing email that comes in, and we want to be able to learn from Mimecast, what that link was, perhaps that was in the email. Or furthermore, if that email came in and it had a malicious attachment, maybe we'd like to know about that malicious file. So Netskope's security cloud is all about kind of governing access to websites and cloud applications. So for employees that are accessing cloud apps and the web generally, we were able to examine that traffic, and we were able to say that that's a bad website, or that's a cloud application that you shouldn't be using, or you shouldn't be interacting with in a certain way. But of course, by sharing intelligence with Mimecast, we can bolster that capability. So Netskope has a part of our service called the Cloud Threat Exchange, and we can envisage it as bolting into our cloud, if you like, and allowing us to exchange data with a number of partners in our wider ecosystem. So if we extend that integration to Mimecast, what we can do is share those indicators of compromise bidirectionally. So if Netskope discovers that there's a malicious URL while someone was trying to access it on a website. Maybe we analyze that URL, or we analyze the content that's delivered from it. And we say, well, this is a malicious URL. We can send that information to Mimecast, and they can look for it in any new inbound emails that might be coming in. And as I say, it works the other way around. If Mimecast security intelligence and research finds a new piece of malware, they can tell us about it. And we can look in these other channels, right? So it's about covering off the different ways that these malicious files or malicious websites could find a way into our organization. And by sharing intelligence, we obviously increase our ability to protect against it. So this is the first way that we can integrate with Mimecast, or rather Mimecast and Netskope can work together to protect your organization. And I mentioned a moment ago that, if we did have malware, it could be on a mission to exfiltrate data from your organization, which leads us perhaps into a conversation about data, which is our next topic of integration, and not just data generally, but protecting your data. And John, I think we've got our couple of polls now to see what people think about this.
Yeah, so guys, keep enjoying your nice siren drink there. Got two polls. I'm going to bring Dora in now to kind of kick off the first one. And by the way, there's a Q&A as well. So if you see the Q&A button, please, if you've got some queries or questions you had in mind, please look at that. But I think you've got about 10 seconds. We'll move quickly on. How is sensitive data shared with your supply chain? Email, cloud, collaboration, portals, instant messages. Maybe not sure, maybe covers a raft of other areas. But take a swig of beer as you hit the button. And actually, Matt, this is a lovely light beer, may I add as well, this one. So I don't look as unprofessional swigging back cans of lager on a Friday afternoon as I normally do. Usually I don't turn my camera. So email, 72%. We did think actually could be high, so that makes a lot of sense there. Brilliant. Okay. Email. Yeah, that's what we thought. Cloud. Yeah, not sure. Actually, that's really good. Not too many people were unsure. We've got a very well-educated audience in what their end users and staff and their IT is allowing. So actually, yeah, that's good to see. Cool. The second poll we wanted to run: how do you ensure that only the correct channel tool is used to share sensitive data? So I suppose there's a lead on from that one. Obviously, we're throwing these up in the air that sometimes we've got a fair idea what the answers might be, but it's interesting to get your view of it. So how to ensure that only the correct channel tool is used to share sensitive data, blocking cloud apps, using DLP tools, encrypting data, user training, or lack of control. So, these are not anonymous. So if you do hit that one, this won't go back to your management or anything like that. So we got the results there as we take a swig of drink. Oh wow, okay. So we do rely on users, and I think that's a fair point as well, isn't it? We do rely on the best intentions of users, whether they are able to do it or not is the key bit there. But any comments on that one, Ben or Ross? Does that make a bit of sense?
I think it does. I think, ultimately users either will choose the correct channel. It's just whether you're perhaps preventing them from using the wrong channel. So you can try and educate the users. And one of the best ways to do that we've found is actually you can do that on the fly. It doesn't have to be an annual training course. If you have a tool that can tell the user when they're trying to use the wrong application, maybe to share data, and coach them in the right direction, you very quickly change behavior. It can be quite an effective way to manage data loss to the wrong tools, I guess.
And we've seen a lot around that in the moment training as well, trying to put people on big training courses. It's 80% is forgotten 20 minutes later. But I know, Ben, you guys have got you do look at that how to help culturally change people's way of working as well.
Yes, we do. We've got our awareness training platform, which can be used to educate people into the correct ways to do things. But one point I wanted to make about user training, and if that's the only way you're doing it with organizations, users can get tricked nowadays very easily with phishing emails or impersonation emails coming through. It could also be they reply to the wrong email or attach some data they don't realize is sensitive there. So I think that's really where DLP tools come into play on this.
Yeah, how do you automate it? How do you make sure it's standard? How do you make sure your business, you understand your risks as well? Yeah, brilliant. So Ross, at this stage, everyone's taken a couple of sips of their beer, hopefully. When we just make sure I'm hitting the right buttons. So kind of websites, cloud apps, can you give a bit more about that integration and where you see DLP generating and moving towards?
Yeah, so let's look, in the average organization, when you look at the opportunity for data to leak out of the organization, there's lots of different ways, and we used to worry about USB sticks and things like that. But there's new ways now. A lot of end users will be very familiar with cloud applications, be it Dropbox or WeTransfer, whatever it might be, and that's obviously a very obvious way that data can leave the organization, and we need to be able to monitor that. So one of, again, Netskope's core functions is to help manage that usage, and if someone's trying to use WeTransfer, we'll coach them into the direction of using perhaps OneDrive, or the tool they should have been using. So Netscope historically has had a really good view of data leaving the organization to websites, cloud applications, but of course there is another way that data typically leaves the organization, and that's kind of come up in the polls, which is via email. And although Netscope could see or have visibility of and govern the use of things like webmail and people's personal email accounts and things like that, there was still the corporate email channel was still important. And a lot of people have moved that their email systems obviously into the cloud, the most common being the Office 365 environment and Exchange Online, as we sometimes call it. So when we were looking at Office 365, and we can add it to our diagram here as a well-known, recognized cloud app, emails that were being sent out from that, we didn't have visibility of, and we needed a way to fix that. So we weren't interested in building our own full, email, secure email gateway. So we wanted a partnership. Mimecast was the obvious choice here. So what we did was, for our customers that are using Office 365, to initiate their mail flow, we basically turned that in towards our security cloud, so that emails were delivered to us, and we became like an SMTP proxy. And we could then use all our great DLP engines that we have to identify sensitive data, either within the body of an email or within an attachment. And those DLP controls might be simple, word matches and regexes, right up through document fingerprints and into some machine learned kind of image recognition and things like that. So we had this great capability for recognizing perhaps sensitive data within an email, but we needed a way to decide what we were going to do with it. So that was where this partnership with Mimecast was born from. So if we just advance a little bit, John, here, perhaps 2 clicks, we can see the emails turning into our security cloud, where we can label them. And in this example, I've labeled my emails as maybe containing some PCI data. And then we're forwarding that on to Mimecast with that tag in it, saying that this is sensitive data, so that Mimecast can make a decision what to do about that. And I'll let Ben talk about what they might be able to do when we see that sensitive data as an attribute.
Great, thanks, Ross. And just before I go into that, I just want to mention quickly about human error. I saw John opening up the green can earlier, and without going through all of my beers to try and work out which one was the right one to open, I grabbed the green one and opened that. I haven't grabbed the weakest one. It looks like I've grabbed one of the strongest ones. So luckily, I'm only having a few sips of that at the moment. But just taking it back to email, obviously, and this email has now made it into Mimecast. And data and DLP, you want to allow some data to leave the organization. Data has to leave the organization to get to the people it needs to go to. So it's not all about holding things with DLP. And of course, Mimecast can do that and stop the stuff going out that you don't want. But how do you make sure the data that you do need to leave is secure? And with the Mimecast DLP engine, we can pick up on those tags that Netskope have put on there, as Ross says, and we can take the various different actions off the back of them. So we can enforce TLS, so enforce that encryption is available before sending the message through to people. If TLS isn't available, let's make sure we use our secure messaging portal to deliver that to people. It could be that the information can only be shared under NDR. So you could use Mimecast to stamp the body of the message, saying only shared under NDR, for example. Could be multiple different actions you need to take, pushing off to a third-party encryption gateway off the back of Mimecast, seeing the message first of all. Like we said earlier, holding it, it could be converting Word files to PDFs. Any of the actions available within the Mimecast DLP engines can work off the back of the tags that Netskope are doing. It really is given a joined up kind of approach to DLP. So these messages, the same kind of rule set you want to apply across everything. You want to make sure this data can only leave in one particular way and these particular indicators there. And that's really where I see the benefit of the Netskope doing the tagging and the centralized policies across email now, as well as all the other cloud sources that we're talking about. And Mimecast making sure that email leaves in secure ways that you need it to, or doesn't leave at all.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
You're good. Thank you for that. So again, let me just go slightly one more. There was Q&A. There weren't that many questions, but there's the most timeliest of questions. Microsoft, there's been a Microsoft announcement today. Can anyone give any updates on that regarding Netskope? I don't know whether you had a chance, because they must have known we were getting together today, Ross. So maybe you haven't had time to look at it. But any comments on that announcement?
Yeah. So there was a press release, I think, today about our partnership with Microsoft. Obviously, they're a key partner, given that we're all about cloud, and Microsoft Office 365 is the #1 cloud app, right? So I think our press release was specifically about the networking partner program that Microsoft run, which is kind of an opportunity for vendors like ourselves to align ourselves with their network connectivity principles, which is about enabling people to connect to Microsoft Office 365 directly, avoiding the traditional architectures of backhauling and hub and spoke and so on, in order to get the best user experience out of that Office 365 platform. So, Microsoft are a key strategic partner for us, and obviously we support some of the largest Office 365 deployments globally and help them manage and secure data in there, as well as helping them re-architect their networks to better connect to Office 365. So yeah, I'm sure there are more details in the press release that I haven't read in full myself, but I'll leave people to look at that if they want to.
Makes sense. And everyone on the call as well, if you've got some Q&As, questions for Matt on the drink side, please use that button as well. So keep us up to date there. Got one question here. How do you protect against email malware in Office 365 with valid file types attachments but embedded malware once you click on the attachment, i.e. doc, X, or notes? Again, it's live.
Yeah, so I can comment on that. I mean, so this is an email coming in, perhaps it says with a valid file attachment. So maybe that means that sometimes you get things like droppers coming in, right? So you get the Excel sheet with the macros in. It's not detected as a piece of malware, but obviously once it's on the machine, it performs some action. Typically, that is to download further malware. So again, depending where that malware is downloaded from, we see a lot of malware hosted within OneDrive environments, Google Drive, for example. Being able to inspect those files, that data in motion, and be able to apply not just the traditional AV engines, but maybe some more sophisticated detection on those files means that we could stop those secondary payloads coming down. So that kind of kill chain slide I used earlier with all those different phases of an attack, any of those could actually be blocked by Netskope, being in between the user and the cloud app or the website that they're communicating with. So I think however it tries to come into the organization, whether Mimecast, I'm sure, would attempt to stop it at the perimeter. Ben could talk more to that. Netskope would pick it up if it got further on, and together we obviously provide that kind of layered approach to security.
Yeah, if I may, just off the back of that, really is one of the stats we gave earlier was 90 to 96% of malicious content really comes through email. So we do see a wealth of attachments coming through which are malicious. The macro kind of files tend not to be picked up to begin with by AV engine signature-based stuff because that particular file hasn't got anything malicious to it. We use multiple different techniques from that to detect it when it's coming through the gateway. So first of all, we'll use a static file analysis. That's given us the ability to look at the code within the file, line by line, read that code, and follow all the forks through, the if-else statements within there. Really useful to avoid sandboxing, evasion kind of technologies from that side of it. But once we've gone through that technique as well, we then push down into our full system emulation sandboxing techniques as well. So again, that holistical kind of approach by executing the file from there. If it's clean, we allow it through. If it's dangerous, we'll hold that. But that's some of the stuff we can also share that threat intelligence into Netskope.
Cool. No, good questions. But I've had a really important question. What's the next? What would the next beer be? And that person was asking for a friend, not for himself. So Matt, you can hear me. Do you want to just shout out one just whilst we get to the end of this? This
Sure. The first one I'll talk about after the session is Illumina. So if people want to grab hold of it and start on it, then yeah, I'll talk about that afterwards.
We try and answer all questions here. Last question. I'm conscious of time. Netskope and someone's a Netskope and Mimecast customer. Hopefully through BlueSource, maybe not. Hopefully. Is the integration automatic, or is there a bit of configuration required? Maybe it's one to take offline, but if there's a quick answer to that, or is it something we can take off?
I can speak quickly to that. I know from Netskope's perspective, it's just a case of switching that on. So you won't see it, in your Netskope console today. It needs to be enabled at the back end, and then it's just a case of configuring email to be steered in the right direction and to apply those DLP policies. So there's licensing involved, but in terms of technical configuration, it's very straightforward.
Cool. Brilliant. Thank you, guys. As I said, questions on the beers for Matt, questions that come into your head about what we're talking about today. And by the way, that chap's friend said thank you. So guys, so Matt, thank you for that. Cool. So Q&A. What I wanted to also give a quick, just summarized what I think I've heard today. Threat sharing and integration is going to be key across core vendors. You just announced the Microsoft integration today. Networking and security are joining, obviously, towards the SASE. Find out more about that. And it sounds like DLP is everywhere. It needs to be everywhere. It's a core set of policy and that can be managed across various vendors is also key. Why try and create various policy at each entry level? Can we roll these out across that integration, and making sure the partners you go for actually are thinking along those lines as well, in particular when Microsoft and Office 365 is involved. And I suppose final kind of summary for me is that BlueSource value. We're the ones trying to make sure your end users have the right access to the right data, whether they're remote working, office bound, mobile, in a secure and compliant manner. So being able to help you and your IT teams and your end users deliver the policy that's required allows us to work with Mimecast, delivering kind of Microsoft solutions, but making sure in a compliant, secure way. So guys, thank you very much for that. Next step, if you're thinking around these worlds, you're on that journey. We've got a data protection workshop that talks about in general. And then we've also got a DLP focused workshop as well, where we go into the policy side, trying to get a bit about where you're going and what enforcements you have as well, and recommendations there as well. So thank you. I won't say sit back and enjoy. I'm still on camera, so I better not fall off my seat. Matt, if you're about, I will pass over and stop sharing and give you over the keys of the call.
Brilliant. Thanks very much. So yeah, I introduced myself at the start of the call, but yeah, my name is Matt from Siren Craft Brew. We are a small independently owned craft brewery based in Berkshire and Finch Hampstead. We have been going since 2013, just gearing up for our 8th birthday festival, which is going to be a virtual affair, of course, on the bank holiday weekend. But we exist simply to just make really delicious beer. Hopefully, it sounds like John, you were enjoying your can of Yulu, but hopefully you all enjoy all the beer and agree that they are delicious. But before I kind of talk any more on that, I know some of you have probably already opened your can of Lumina, but I'm just about to open this now and enjoy that. So I'm just going to get into my glass.
Where'd you get your names from? Yulu, Lumina, Broken Dream? Where did the names come from?
So the story is, so Siren was established by our founder, Darren. He used to have a business in IT security and decided that he would sell up and spend a bit more time with his kids. And I think he lasted around about 3 days before he thought, nope, they're driving me mad. Let's find something to do. So he started homebrewing, I think, really as a hobby. That's something that he could do, just get into the garage, get away from it all, and just have a bit of fun with it. But it turned out he was really good at it. He made some cracking beers, and this is kind of, he decided this is what I want to do. He kind of just went for it, really, and he described it as his siren call. This is what he always should have been doing, hence where the name Siren came from. So from there, obviously, the sirens of Greek mythology. There's a lot of references to that, and as you can see, each can has, or each of our core range cans, they have a siren on, and these represent the beer. So they talk about the beer and the story of the beer, as much as kind of the beer kind of talks about itself. All these names generally are based around that. So Lumina is a siren, and she kind of talks about space and the stars and how they're represented in not only mythology, but also in kind of nautical terms, and how the mariners would use those to kind of themselves around the world. Yulu is an Earl Grey Pale Ale, and it's named after a chap called Lu Yu, who was a famous kind of Chinese tea importer. So they all have references to sirens, to mythology. There's nautical terms, all these things. So, and with these core range, they're very much brands in their own right. These, for example, Lumina, you'll be able to find this in your local Waitrose and things like that. So we very much build these as brands as much as Siren is a brand. And then in terms of other beers, the specials, they're one-off beers. So that's where we can be a bit creative and just have a bit of fun, really. So we've got a beer in the box, which we'll have after this, called Granola Coaster. It's obviously a pun on roller coaster, and it is a granola IPA. So we just have a bit of fun kind of naming it, and just we can be super creative, really.
Cool. I think some good one, a beer,
Illumina,
broken dream. So good one. Sorry, Matt.
Yeah, again, at one of our other core range beers, that was actually named after the guy who our first ever head brewer who designed the recipe. He'd spent a lot of time traveling around Europe, brewing with lots of top end breweries, and we were basically his last stop before he was going to go back to the US. And this was the recipe was a culmination of everything that he'd learned on his travels around Europe, but also, it was signified his last beer that he created before he went back. And that's kind of where the name came from, Broken Dream. It was the end of an era for him, an end of a dream, but representing the culmination of everything that he had kind of learned, but also brought to us, and everything that we'd kind of enabled him to do, and given him just free reign just to create this beer. So but he left the beer with us. That was his creation, and that's where that came from. So that's quite a nice a nice story in itself.
Cool.
But Lumina is a session IPA. Session meaning exactly what you think it means, really. It's sessionable. It's fairly low ABV for a craft beer. It's easy drinking, very light, very flavoursome, very thirst quenching, and that's what a session IPA is. So lots of, for me, it's got this beautiful kind of golden yellow kind of colour to it. It already looks refreshing, inviting before you even kind of had a sniff and a taste of it. On the nose, you get these beautiful kind of, tropical fruits. And then when you kind of dive into it, again, lots of tropical fruits. For me, mango, lots of mango, some pineapple kind of swimming around in there as well. And just a little bit of kind of grapefruit right at the end, just a tinge of bitterness to kind of bring it back from being overly sweet. But yeah, Lumina is designed to be that beer, that something that you'll want another one of. We, like I say, we brew lots of different beers. Some are very flavoursome, very in your face, and maybe one is enough. But this is designed for to be that beer where you have another pint of that. Maybe you could have 2 or 3 pints of this, and just sit back and enjoy it, and just super refreshing and easy drinking.
And are these more?
Any questions anyone's got for me? Sorry, John.
Is that more a summer drink then? Do you sell a lot more of these during the summer, or are they just any time of the year? They're just nice, stick them in the fridge, they work well, or?
So do you know what? I think this beer would work any time of the year. For me, it's very much a summer beer, but that's because we launched this last summer, really, just before summer. So this is actually this is our newest core range beer. So I've said core range a few times. When I say core range, they're the beers that we produce all the time, all round. So they're always available. We're always brewing it. Those beers are Luminar, Soundwave, Yulu, Broken Dream, and Calypso. So they are our 5 sirens. They're an introduction into us as a brewery, us as a brand, and probably an introduction to craft beer, because they introduce all these different styles and flavors and flavor profiles and things like that. So they're always available. This one was designed to be slightly easier going than Soundwave, but still trying to keep that flavor. We also wanted to make a beer that was gluten free as well, which this is. That was important for us to have that in a range as a beer that's always available. Because we don't want anyone really to miss out. And if you're kind of gluten intolerant, or any kind of dietary requirements or anything like that, you can still drink this. So that was important for us to kind of develop. So it's all encompassing, always kind of available, and everyone can kind of drink it, really. And that's kind of where we wanted to go with that. But yeah, like I say, we released it in the summer last year, and that's kind of why it reminds me of summer, really. It was just after the first lockdown. You're allowed to go back out into pub gardens. The sun was out. We had that odd kind of heat wave, if you can remember that far back. And I was sat in a pub garden with some friends drinking this, and there's nothing better than that, really, I don't think. We also have this on cask as well, and this beer on cask is something else. It's absolutely superb. Question from Timothy. So why so many quite high ABV? Is that just part of the brewing process, or we just piss heads? So interestingly, I think probably the reverse question is why are mass-produced beers so low ABV? Why are they being brewed to be that way? They're all the same. They all kind of float between 4% and 5%. They all kind of have similar taste profiles. They all kind of look and smell in a similar way. If you go to Belgium, for example, there's lots of kind of strong beers and all kinds of different flavors, and the same in Germany, where 2 countries where they never really lost the art for brewing. And I think we did, and we got used to this same beer being brewed all the time and always tasting exactly the same. So that's kind of I know that's kind of a kind of not really answer the question, but that's kind of, it's quite relevant, because beer is an art form, and you can kind of create as many different styles of beer, flavors, ABVs, profiles as you want. It's the process allows it to go on and on and on. So we can brew a beer that's 2.8% and have it as a table beer, just something really refreshing. But we also can brew something that's 12%, that's got lots and lots of flavors, that would drink similar to maybe a port or a fortified wine or something like that. The brewing process allows you to do that, and allows you to kind of have a bit of fun with it. Of course, if you're to make as much money as possible, then chucking the expensive ingredients and creating a beer that falls into the highest kind of tax bracket for beer duty probably isn't going to be the way forward. So potentially that's why we got used to having these kind of beers that were all kind of really exactly the same, because they served the purpose. It was a beer that was easy to produce and mass produce, and was gonna be a profitable product for a brewery. So whereas for us, it's about making the tastiest, best beer we can, regardless. And what you'll find as well is that with a bigger ABV and a bigger kind of body, you're able to get more flavors in. It's a different experience. you can put these flavors in, much like a fortified wine. You can get those really intense fruit flavors because it has that big ABV, that backbone, that body to it. And you wouldn't be able to get those kind of flavors in in a like a light beer or a cider or something like that. So it kind of follows in that sense as well. So of course, if anyone's got any more questions, then do keep them coming. I'm trying to keep an eye on the chat as well as the Q&A. As I don't see your question, but I've just opened the Q&A. A few more questions here.
There's a question.
I don't think I've seen Siren Business.
Sorry, Matt. There's a question there about whether we sell through pubs, and I was just going to say Netscope at the moment doesn't sell through pubs. We would only sell through resellers like Blue Source, but just sort of jump in. I didn't want that question to go unanswered.
Yeah, maybe that's that might have been for that one. Yeah, pubs we do actually. I mean, post or pre-lockdown or COVID, should I say, we were an 85% on-trade business, meaning that our whole business model was there to supply pubs, restaurants, local kind of off licenses and bottle shops and things like that. Obviously, we had to completely change that when the lockdown hit. So now everything goes into cans. And we sell via supermarkets, bottle shops, direct to consumers from our web store. When society begins to open up again, we will. I don't know whether we'll go fully back. People's habits will likely have changed, but we will definitely be getting beers in kegs, in casks, and getting them out to pubs as much as possible, because that's why our kind of brewery really was set up. So, and that kind of answers Stephen's question. So we have beers in Morrison's, in Sainsbury's. We actually had, you might have seen our beer, if any of you watched Sunday Brunch, I believe it is, with Tim Nigel and Simon. We actually had a beer on there last weekend, I believe. It was a pancake beer. And if it's good enough for Louise Redknapp, then it should be good enough for everyone else. So yeah, we do have beers in supermarkets. Lumina is available in Waitrose, and some supermarkets will approach us and they will say, can you brew a specific beer, which we do tend to do. Question for James: which of these would keep in the fridge, and which ones are called room temperature? So two ways to look at this, James. So you should always store beer as cold as possible. And that's just storing. So if you have room in the fridge, or even if you have your own little beer fridge like me, pop it in the fridge and keep it as cool as possible, around about 4 degrees. And that's just to store it, and that's to just keep it as fresh as possible. In terms of drinking it, that's probably a personal preference, I guess. I would drink higher ABV stouts and things like that, probably just slightly chilled, a little bit warmer. But lagers and these, probably drink straight from the fridge, I guess. If you can't store your beer in a fridge, as long as you keep it in a room or somewhere where the temperature won't fluctuate, then that's perfect. Maybe the cupboard under the stairs or something like that. Even if it's 15 degrees, it's not optimum, but as long as if it stays 15 degrees, then that's great. The worst place to pop your beer would be on a windowsill or in a conservatory where the temperature fluctuates, because what it does, it stresses out any kind of the residual yeast and things in the beer and creates off flavors. So drinking it really is personal preference, but I always say that if it's a stronger beer, drink it a little bit warmer. Sunil, yes, we're online, so you can buy it direct from us. You can also find us on, there's lots of wholesalers and bottle shops. The one thing that's happened with kind of the lockdown is lots of businesses have had to pivot to selling online. So actually, you can find our beers all over the place online at the moment, but you can also buy direct for us as well. Is there a suggested order for remainder? Ben, your friend's pretty thirsty. It sounds. Yeah, absolutely. The next one that we're going to move on to is Granola Coaster. So if you're ready for it, then pop that one open. I'll probably stay on this one to that in a few minutes. But if you're ready for the next one, then Granola Coaster is the beer. Any recommendations for a habitual spirits drinker who typically doesn't go near beer or lager? So we do lots of barrel aging talks. So we have a large barrel aging program, around about 400 different barrels with various different beers in. And those beers, are usually a first use. So they've been at a distillery, emptied, and we buy them. So gin, whiskey, bourbon, rye whiskies, red wine, white wine, port, sauternes, cognac, and any kind of barrel you can think of, we've got that, and we have a beer in it. We have a really beautiful beer called Fireside on our website at the moment, which has been barrel aged for 24 months in various different whiskey barrels. And that does impart a very kind of, whiskey kind of like spirit kind of vibe to it. So that sounds like that could be, up your street. They do have some, some generally, depending on what beer it is, some very kind of acidic flavors or very kind of like robust roast flavors. Beers that have been barrel aged tend to have those. But yeah, I mean, if you're a spirits fan, then I'd definitely check some of those out. They're on the price side. Obviously, we age them in barrels for years. 2 years at the very least, some for 48 months. But they do. You would drink them like you would drink a spirit. You would just kind of pour out a glass and sip it, and it would probably last you an evening. Just back onto the chat, just kind of see if I can through some of these kind of questions. Distributing our beers via perfect draft. Yeah, so I get asked this a lot. As you mentioned, the patent is owned by AB InBev, and while it would be possible to get there, our beers on there are obviously probably some hoops that we have to jump through, but it's also a question of capacity as well. Pre kind of lockdown, we were just about brewing enough beer to keep up with demand from pubs. Obviously, in an ideal world, we would have no amount, of beer that we couldn't brew, and no way we can package it so everyone can enjoy it. I'm sure, something like this will be on our radar kind of very soon, because it would be great to get there. But there is no doubt a specific, kind of bits of kit that we need to invest in to fill that, and we need to obviously buy all the packaging and things like that. So there would be some kind of investment, in time and that from us. I'm sure once our capacity is increased enough that there's no trouble fulfilling demand from the pubs, then we can actually start looking into these ideas. But yeah, it's a great little system. Just plug and play and off you go, and you've got yourself a tasty pint. So it'd be great to see our beers on there. Ellie, when are we intending to open the tap room again? From someone who's only watched Rain Reading. And do we have any collabs planned with any of the neighbouring breweries? So the tap yard, that is a very good question. So the tap yard at the moment is open as a off-license / bottle shop, so you can pop down and buy our beers direct from there. In terms of when we can have people sitting there drinking in, that kind of remains to be seen. Obviously the current advice is April the 12th we'll be able to open outside. Obviously that's very weather dependent, whether we can do that. Probably involve a fair amount of investment in terms of outdoor seating and covers and things like that, which depending on what it is, we'll have to look into it. I for one cannot wait to be able to go to the pub again, but we have to figure out a way to do it safely, a way to do it that we can kind of, that suits the business, and that we can figure out. So we'll be looking at all the guidance and everything very closely. But on the 12th and have people down again, but I think we'll have to look into that kind of carefully. But you can still pop down and get our beers from our tap yard, and we'll be supplying all the local pubs in Reading that are going to open and have outdoor seating. And there's a great pub in in central Reading called the Nag's Head, which have invested heavily in their beer garden. So we'll be getting as much beer to them as possible. So if you can't get it from us, you'll definitely be able to get it from them.
Matt, there's a question on Matt, there's one question in the Q&A that I've always been interested in. Stouts, and there's a couple of stouts in the package. Are they best, can you drink them, are they best drank from a can or from a glass? And that's your stouts. That's one of them.
I always suggest drinking from a glass. And again, kind of what I always say is, beer is, it is meant to be enjoyed. It's a social beer, a social kind of drink. We're not, we're not creating, we're creating very high-end beers, but of course, we don't want to be, I guess, for want of a better word, we don't want to be too pretentious about it. I'm not going to tell you what vintage you should be drinking and how you should drink it and things like that. Having said that, there are, certain ways that you can enhance the experience. And I think personally, drinking from a glass, you always get more of an experience. You get a better sense of the aroma, and it just I think it tastes better from a glass, personally, but this is personal preference. So I would say any beer, regardless of what style, that to really kind of get the maximum enjoyment, then definitely a glass. But if you're drinking out of a can kind of person, then all power to you, go for it. Not a problem at all. I just realised I missed out the second part of Eddie's question there with about the collaborations. So we did one recently with Elusive, which are the brewery that's right next to us. We've just released one this Friday. It's not a local brewery, but a collaboration with Yonder. We're always looking at kind of teaming up with other breweries and brewing some fantastic beers. So definitely keep an eye out for that. We love working with the kind of local businesses, breweries and things. So I think as soon as society opens up again, there's going to be a lot of these kind of collaborations flying around and a lot of breweries wanting to get back out there and having a lot of fun. And then the question from Philip about kind of different styles of beer. I'll talk about that as we go, because it's quite a large question, but it all comes down to really the history of beer. An IPA, as you've touched on, is called, it stands for India Pale Ale. There's lots of different versions of this story, and that depending on who you speak to, or you'll get a different answer. And I don't think there's any nailed on answer. It's kind of been lost in history. But the IPA was a beer that was invented or first brewed in the UK. It was, more likely that it was brewed in Burton, and it was brewed kind of specifically, really, or it was a solution to a problem of getting beer out to India, out to the empire. And as you can imagine, back there, back in those days, that there was no refrigeration or cold chain, so you pop a few kegs of beer on a ship, it's going to sit there for months and months. It's going to be hot and warm, and it doesn't come out fantastically, out the other end. So one of the answers to that was to put lots of hops in it. So hops have oils which have preserving qualities. So by heavily hopping a beer, actually means that it's going to come out the other end a lot better. And that was, that's how the style really kind of developed, and that's why what you have here is a very hoppy beer. Obviously, it was a little bit stronger as well than some beers would have been, because the ABV helps kind of keep it as well. And that's how that kind of beer developed. And if you look back in history on all these different styles, they've developed for this or that, or kind of whatever reason, or they're slightly different from each other because of where they were brewed. So they have slightly different water profiles, or different ingredients. For example, the main difference between a German Helles and a Czech Pils really is down to the water profile. The water would have been slightly different in those two countries, and they just had to work with ingredients that they had to hand. Obviously, these days we have technology that allows us to manipulate water profiles, and we can ship ingredients all over the world, and we can cold chain beer. So those things don't matter as much now, but that's where most of these kind of styles of beer really kind of came from. So and there's around about 200 different styles of beer. So it take me hours and hours and hours to kind of answer that question. But for the short of it is that, these beers started kind of being developed out of, I guess, necessity, or, another good example is the Russian Imperial Stout, which again was a beer that was brewed in the UK. And it was brewed to be exported to Russia during the reign of Catherine II. Obviously, we needed to cater to Russian taste, so we pumped up the ABV to around about 12% and just made it very strong, and to kind of cater to those tastes. So yeah, if you look back in it really is fascinating. But all these different beers have kind of developed for all these kind of different reasons.
I did, Matt, I don't know if you see that question there about hazy beers, and hazy beers in the old days were a bit cloudy. You wouldn't touch a kind of a cloudy beer in the old days. Now it's a lot of beers. I think that's a good question, actually. Is that just a brewing process, or is that a
yeah? So and that is absolutely true. And when I first started kind of working within craft beer and sending beer to my dad, he would say, "Oh, I'm not sure this is safe. It's hazy," because he came from the, I guess, the era, or the kind of the school of thought that if a beer is hazy, it's bad. But that's not true at all. And I don't really know where that came from. Yeah, maybe it was because if you think of water, if you have this crystal clear mineral water, then that's great. But if you have hazy water, it's not that great. And there's a lot of truth to that. But that's not really true within beer. What that haze is, so this kind of the haze from those little bits of hot particles and kind of yeast particles and things like that. And that's where that haze comes from. Now, what you could do is you can use what they call finings, which will drop that haze out. So it's like an enzyme that would drop all those little particles out of suspension all the way to the bottom. And then you could just kind of take that away and you'd have a clear beer. But within that haze, within those proteins and the particles, there's flavor. So by doing that, what you're actually doing is you're actually taking away flavor. An analogy I like to use, it's like almost like cutting the fat off of bacon. If you're going to have a sandwich, just do it properly. Leave that fat there, enjoy it, and have really tasty bacon. By cutting that bacon off, yes, it's better for you, and yes, maybe it looks better, but you are taking away the flavor. And that's kind of the same with beer. There's nothing bad about it. Maybe to some people it does look as aesthetically pleasing. I've grown up with kind of hazy beers, and I've got absolutely no problem with it. So and obviously some of these modern kind of some of the kind of really old school lagers, when they're clear, they do look absolutely delicious and refreshing and inviting. But with IPAs, they're heavily hop. They've got lots of hops in them, lots of proteins in them. They are going to be hazy. We brew the beers, and how they come out is how we serve them. We don't use finings. We don't use kind of any weird ingredients to kind of drop it out or anything like this. It's all completely natural. Our beers are unfiltered. They're unfined. Maybe little bits of sediment in there, but that's what keeps them completely natural. But yeah, no, that is a very kind of it is a very good question, and I think you'll find Weiss beers obviously are very kind of hazy, and you can't see through them. Stouts obviously are very dark, and I think that's the way they're brewed. That's the way they come out, and just kind of just go with it and just enjoy them as they are, I guess.
Matt, I was just wondering.
So I'm just going to go and grab.
I just wondered. You've got your Siren Broken Dream, and I notice it says a breakfast stout. So I grew up drinking a bit of Guinness back in the home country, but then I looked at it. 6.5% is a fairly strong breakfast stout. What's the terminology behind using breakfast and stout in the same sentence?
Sure. So again, going back to kind of the styles and the history of styles. So What's happened with craft beer is we've kind of rediscovered the art of brewing, and really, the sky is the limit. So any beer you want to brew, you can go for it. And so what this has done is it's developed a lot of new styles, and these have come through, just people trying things out, using new technologies, innovations within the brewing industry. And so this has seen a surge in all these new popping up, and there's around about 200 different styles of beer, all told. You could probably, the average person could probably name 3 or 4, stout, lager, IPA, pale ale. But within these there's subgenres. So within a stout, there's lots of different kind of subgenres. For example, Guinness, I think technically is a dry Irish stout, and then Broken Dream is a breakfast stout. Now, breakfast refers to the fact that we use oats, porridge oats, within the recipe. And the reason we use that is it creates kind of thickness and creaminess and gives it a little bit of kind of richness, decadence. And we do that to get that. And then obviously it just got naturally dubbed a breakfast stout because you're putting oats in it, oats being a breakfast item. So that was, the name, someone discovered at some point by putting these in, you get this kind of really rich creaminess. What do we call it? Let's call it a breakfast stout because it's got oats in. And that's how these things usually play along, all kinds of, another kind of a big thing at the moment is a pastry stout. So it's a stout that's made to be super sweet and have lots of these kind of really rich kind of dessert flavors in there. And it's been called a really kind of rich kind of like pastry, thick, creamy, lots of sugar and kind of crazy flavors. So I'm just going to go and grab. I've got a beer fridge behind me, so I'm just going to roll back and get my can of granola coaster. I think a few of you probably already opened that beer.
I think I decided to go straight for the breakfast stout. So.
How's it taste, John? You enjoying it?
Because I am a Guinness drinker by trade. They're really good. Really actually, because I've tried. There's a local pub near us that actually has got its own brewery at the back, and they've done some stouts. It's so hard to get a good stout, when you're used to Guinness. So that one's really delicious. Really, really nice. Actually, really nice.
John, I'm a Guinness drinker myself, and I've accidentally opened the Midnight Mischief in the wrong order, and I think I'd prefer to drink that than Guinness from now on.
Wow, there's a nice one, Matt.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and that's great to hear because I love a pint of Guinness myself, and if I go to a bar and there's not many craft options, and I see a pint of Guinness there. And you always know that you're going to get a good, tasty, kind of nice pint of stout. But then water stouts and so many different flavors. And Ben, the stout that you referred to is called a milk stout. And essentially, it's just a lot sweeter. We've used nitro within that to give it a real kind of thick, kind of creamy mouthfeel. So what you've got is this really kind of decadent, quite sweet, but really easy drinking 4.7% stout, and it's quite incredible. And it's it's been it's a favorite of the brewery, that beer, almost like a dessert beer, but not overly sweet and very, very, very drinkable.
Excellent. So where can I get this from again?
So that particular one, I think you'd have to go direct to us for, or if you've got some specialist, kind of bottle shops anywhere near you, there's lots of these kind of craft bottle shops popping up all over the place. They'll be supplying that. I don't believe that one's in a supermarket at the moment, although there is a pancake version available in Sainsbury's of that beer. So it's basically that beer with maple, some kind of maple flavors going on.
Great. I'll give that one.
So yeah, I've just opened Granola Coaster, which is a brown ale, like a traditional kind of style that we've taken and had a bit of fun with. So this beer, essentially, from the name, it's been created to kind of taste like granola. So we put kind of toasted coconuts and kind of like, and there's some really dark sugars. And we've actually used maple chips and amberana wood in this beer. So amberana wood is a wood native to Brazil, which basically will give lots of kind of real kind of Christmassy, like spice, kind of clove kind of characters. And then the maple wood obviously gives it a bit of sweetness. What we do is we use a bit of kit to kind of draw the flavour out of the wood into the beer to get these really interesting flavours. Add in kind of some kind of little hops and I think a little bit of zest and vanilla, and what we've got is a granola beer, but also I think almost reminisce of a Christmas pudding, or it's got some very Christmassy flavours. So Ian's to confess, couldn't resist the temptation and drank all the stout last night. Go for it, absolutely, why not? IBV is not something I'm used to with Guinness, Murphy's, and Beamish, but the flavours of your stout are fantastic. Yeah, I mean, and this is what we were talking about. You can get more, got a bigger kind of depth and backbone to work with, and we put a lot of kind of different different ingredients in that beer. We use coffee from Crimson and Sons in there. We use smoked malts in there to give it a bit of smokiness. There's chocolate malts in there and roasted malts in there to kind of give it some kind of a bit of chocolate kind of flavor, but almost not like a burnt caramel, but it's got everything going on and a little bit of sweetness. It's not too bitter, so there's lots and lots of flavors, and we put a lot of time and effort, or our kind of, as I touched on earlier, first ever head brewer, used all his knowledge from traveling around kind of the US and Europe to kind of create this beer. And it's actually an award-winning. We won the Grand Supreme Champion Beer of Britain back in 2018, so it's an award-winning beer. Cameras kind of recognized it, and it's something that we brew all year round, and it's just really delicious. And it's great to see that that maybe we might be converting some Guinness drinkers over to us. That's cool to hear.
At 6.5% though, it would take a strong. It wouldn't be a session. You wouldn't watch it all for the rugby. That's for sure.
Yeah, definitely. And like I mentioned, that Lumina is that kind of definition of a session beer where you can drink a few of them and just kind of enjoy it and just kind of with your mates. This Broken Dream beer is designed to be just packed for the flavour. Maybe you could probably have a pint and a half of it or something like that. I think it's quite decadent. It's quite rich. It's almost having like too much chocolate cake, if that's a thing for you, but it gets to a point where it's just a little bit too much. But that it's designed to have bags of flavour and not necessarily be something you drink pints and pints of. But that's entirely up to you. I do know people. Some of our regular customers will always just drink the stouts, and even when it's 30 degrees out, they'll have a couple of pints of Broken Dream, and they'll be loving it. Wayne, granola coaster is amazing. It's such a unique kind of taste. Yeah, it is. It's super unique. This was a little bit of an experiment for us to brew this. And what we did is we brewed a 5,000 litre batch of it, but split it into 3. And so what we've done is we've released another version of this, which is the same base beer, but we've used cacao and orange within that. So again, it's like this, but kind of tastes like Jaffa cakes. And then we'll release another one in a couple of weeks as well. So this is the base beer, and then we've kind of split it into 3, and we're going to release another. There'll be 2 variants coming from it, which is a bit of fun, really. And that's kind of what craft beer is. It's always we're never resting on our laurels. We always want to make super tasty beer, and continue to do that. And just because you've made a brilliant beer doesn't mean that we'll stop there. We're always trying to figure out how we can make it better, whether it's changing the recipe, using new bits of equipment and kind of techniques. And, we've invested around about £2.5 million in our brewery in the last kind of 2 or 3 years, which, for a very small family run business is a huge amount. But, it just goes, we're just obsessed with quality and making great beer. And that's all we want to do, just make the best beer that we possibly can. But yeah, it turns into a little bit of an obsession. And
Matt, how then do you decide to kind of run a proper big batch of a drink? So how do people, is it just sales in a pub, or do you do questionnaires? How do you decide that you're going to keep running Midnight Mischief? How do you decide on what beers? Because it sounds like you do a lot of beers, you kind of test a few, you run a few, you do the brewing process. How then do you decide, actually, we're on to a winner with this one? Let's go back into it, let's get this into the pubs, let's get it into the barrel, let's kind of fully, how do you decide that process?
Yeah, so I mean, the core range are really designed to be crowd pleasers. In a sense, it's all about, for us, consistency and quality with those beers. And they're the beers that you'll most likely find in the pubs. If you go to some very unique pubs, there are bars and things like that out there that will only sell craft beer. They'll probably have a few of these core range beers on, but they like to buy our specials, and people like to try new things and try different things. So I think it's a balance between, choosing a beer that, we can brew over again and people know what they're getting. I mean, for me, for example, if I go to, like a craft pub, I will start off with a couple of beers that I know. So, I will have maybe a Lumina, or choose a brewery that's got something similar. There's lots of breweries out there that have the beers that they make constantly. And I'll start off with something that, I know is going to be brilliant. And I know it's consistent. And then I'll try something else on the menu that, I mostly enjoy because I just love beer. But, sometimes there's a little bit of a punt. Not every beer is for everybody. And I think it's having that mix of choice and kind of innovation, but also creating things that people know and they can kind of rely upon. So it's just having that range of beers that you can rely on, but also have a bit of fun with, I guess. There are all of these core range beers. Having said that, did start off life as a beer that we brewed one off, and then thought, well, maybe we're onto something here. So they all started off life as that, and kind of moved on. Lumina, for example, it took us 2.5 years to kind of create that recipe, and it started off life as 2 different beers. So it's gone through a phase, and then we ended up as Lumina, and that's kind of where we thought, this is great. This is what we want to keep on brewing, and we kind of nailed in the recipe. But and before that it was Refractions, and then before that I forget the name, but it's been 2 different beers before. So yeah, so it's a bit of a mix. It's trying to find that middle ground between creating things that are reliable and people know what they're going to get, but also having some fun and trying mad stuff.
Cool. Matt, I'm conscious of time. I think our point was to not eat into people's evenings, so I think we're a few people are dropping off as well. Any last commentary you'd like to pass on?
Yeah, no, I've tried to answer as many questions as I possibly can. So apologies. I've just seen Stephen's. Have you got any jobs going? It's not a bad job at all. I absolutely love talking about beer. We're so passionate about what we do at Siren, and it's been really nice to hear all this kind of lovely feedback. And the best kind of compliment we can get is when someone just enjoys the beer. And even Ben said that maybe he's going to be drinking more Midnight Mischief than you might be drinking Guinness, which is fantastic to hear. But also on the other hand, not everybody enjoys everything, and if anything, all we want to do is just open people's eyes up to what craft beer can be. And even if some you've not enjoyed every single BU here, hopefully people have been able to kind of see, what it could be, and it might inspire you to go out there and try new things. But if you want to, if you enjoy what you've had at Siren, that's fantastic as well. So,
Matt, cheers, thank you. I'm just picking up on something you said earlier about really good ingredients, really, passionately put together. And you don't always get it right, but the bits that you do get right, you build on that as well. So I'm hoping that kind of with the customers still on the call, see Blue Source as that, we try and bring in the best of partnerships, Gartner leading ones, Mimecast, and obviously our friends at Netskope as well. So it's great to have you guys on board. And again, I just wanted to go around. Before I leave closing parts, anything? A few last questions, Scott. So best of luck with the rugby for the Scots against the French tonight. Granella Coaster seems like it's a bit of a winner, Matt. So good choice of beers. I'm absolutely loving the breakfast stout, or the evening stout, as I'll call it. Just to finish off, everybody have a unless Ross or Ben, any closing thoughts from yourselves? And if I hear you slurring, I know that in the background you
just have a good weekend, everyone, from me, I think.
Yeah, thanks for having us, John. It's been good to talk to people. I've offended a few questions off in the chat about the joint proposition, and obviously people should come to you with those questions in the first instance, and we can talk to them one-to-one if we need to. So thanks to everyone.
Ross, thank you. Ben, thank you. Matt, thank you again. Hopefully we'll see you soon. I think we will. And listen, to everyone that's put this together, thank you to all those guys. And listen, everyone at home, have a great evening. Enjoy the rugby if that's what you're into. Enjoy the rest of the drinks, but do it responsibly, I suppose. So have a great evening, guys, and thank you so much for attending this afternoon. Cheers, and have a good evening.
Cheers, everyone. Thank you so much.
Cheers, now. Cheers, man.
Cheers, Sean.